All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much once again for joining us. We are now going to move away from the bad stuff, the hard stuff, and start tackling some of these problems and some of the good news. Firstly, benefits that you get from pushing through these things, and secondly, ways that we can help people we like to obtain those benefits despite all the many difficulties and challenges that we've been going over. So first of all, okay, if I'm talking about the benefits of playfulness here, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but just for the heck of it, I'm going to do so. Being able to sincerely try to accomplish something while at the same time feeling comfortable with the possibility that you might fail carries extraordinary benefits. If you're not able to get into that space, for example, you simply cannot be creative. You cannot be innovative. You cannot come up with new ideas that have not been tried before and proven to work. And pretty sure I don't need to tell anybody here this either, but world's got some problems, and the so-called tried and true ways that we've been attempting all this time have not been working out so well for us. We need to try new things, and without a willingness to approach them in a sense of playfulness, we're not going to be able to defeat them. We literally need to do this in order to save the world. Not to put too fine a point on it, but being able to have fun failing, or at least being in a space where you might fail, is essential. And the one realm where we can unequivocally give ourselves permission to do that is when we're playing games. That's why I'm so focused on this particular area of giving ourselves permission to fail, to do dumb stuff, and still have fun, despite the fact that we are trying to succeed. We're trying to create a challenge for our friends. Games are perfect for this. There was a study that was conducted not long ago. There is actually some science to back this up. I can post a link in the chat here. Let's get that. Kids who play chess, according to the study, they had a control group and the play group, were much more risk averse than the ones who did not. So they were much less risk averse than the ones who did not. Risk aversion, fear of risk, fear of taking chances was reduced by playing chess. And I thought at first when I saw this, really, chess? We're talking about risk management in the context of a game in which there's no element of chance at all? That's what surely they would have picked a game that involved something like probability analysis, like Yahtzee or something. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, wait a second. The real chance that you take when you're playing chess isn't the chance that this or that move might work out well. That's not left to chance. That's purely deterministic. The real chance that you take is when you sit down at the table to play in the first place. You are taking a chance when you decide to play. That's the risk. And when you sit down and you play chess and you win or you lose, and it was fun, let's do it again, I can easily see how that would lead to a greater resilience to the prospect of risk. And we may see this in players as well. I'm guessing that the Dubro tech folks in Jay's board game group probably feel pretty comfortable just doing dumb stuff for the heck of it, and are more considerate. Oh, actually, I obviously want to hear from you. And your more considerate friends who are more careful, who are more measured in doing things, might be a fair bit more mindful of risk and more reluctant to try things that are risky in some ways. And that sort of tracks with this. And I wonder if the act of playing these sort of pass-fail games where they really actually can fail, and it's still okay after you've failed, might have the further effect of helping them to manage these anxieties in other areas of life as well. So there's another element to this, and that's vulnerability. And again, we're going back to Brené Brown here. Vulnerability is something, it's the gateway that you have to pass through in order to get to playfulness, because you might find yourself thinking, okay, I'm sold. Playfulness is a good idea. It's something that the world needs. I want to contribute to this. I want to be more playful. And you're still anxious. The fear did not magically go away when you decided that you wanted to overcome it. So if you failed terribly, if you sat down, you played a game with your friends, and you were still anxious, you were still uncomfortable, you still felt emotionally exposed, you were still uncertain. So in your failure to be playful, you have succeeded in being vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, you have allowed yourself to experience the benefits of being vulnerable, authenticity, being seen, being accepted, being yourself, truly being able to be present with other people and to allow them to see you for who you are. It's necessary. These things are necessary for connection. And connection is another thing that we're experiencing a crisis in, the epidemic of loneliness and of not being seen, of not feeling like there's anywhere where you belong. All of these things can be accessed through vulnerability. So even in the worst case scenario, you may be able to achieve extraordinary benefits from this. But in order for that to happen, you have to be willing to try in the first place. And some of the anxieties that we went over in part one can be so severe that they will prevent people from even making that attempt in the first place. And we have to take these anxieties seriously. We can't just say, oh, come on, it's just a game. It's never just a game. It's never just a game. There's always some sort of external factor that comes to that. And of course, when you do overcome it, you can say, oh, sure, yeah, it was just a game, but it wasn't just a game. The benefits that you reap from that extend far beyond the table and can give you both the benefits of playfulness and the benefits of creativity far beyond those realms. So this is what we're going for. This is what we're trying for. And my fellow panelists, I would like to invite you now to talk about ways that vulnerability and playfulness have enriched the lives of people you know, enriched you, set of success stories. And if you'd also like to start approaching some ways that you have attempted successfully to help people to be vulnerable, to be playful at play in all various different areas of life, not just in games, but anywhere. I would like to hear from you at this point. Jay, you went last in part one. Why don't you go first for part two?
That's good. Yeah, so I love that you bring this up because what I actually do most of the time at work kind of deals with the next stage on with this, right? Like my job doesn't work with games, but we work with founders of businesses, senior leaders at Fortune 500 companies, like, the people who are solving major problems, whether they be business problems or world problems or social impact problems. About how to go solve these problems. And the thing about solving a giant messy problem is that you can't just like come up with the algorithm in your mind and apply it. You have to like go try a million things because usually you're solving a problem that humanity has never solved before or that no one quite knows the answer to. So you have to go and play around. And I never actually put this together in my head before now, but like you have to sincerely try while being comfortable with failure in order to go do that. And I work with all of these people who are like super high performers. They're like, they have like the pedigree, right? And in the course of like having gotten these like prestigious jobs, they have learned that they can never ever fail anything ever, and they have never put anything out that's not like a 95% chance of succeeding. Like if you're not getting an A, it doesn't count. And so what I have to do most of the time in my job is teach everyone that no, you're looking at a problem where you're starting with 20% confidence of what the answer is, and no one in the world has a better guess than you, right? Like for example, when COVID started happening and all of these small businesses started being like, oh my God, how do I adapt to COVID? Like, I just don't have a playbook for this. And I'm like, literally no one on earth has a playbook for this. This is new for all of us, right? So if you have a guess, your guess is literally as good as anyone else's on earth right now. So just go and do the thing, right? What are you going to do? Fail and also still have no customers because everyone is in lockdown? Like, just try it, right? And so it's just teaching people to put something out at 25, 30% confidence, and kind of trying to do that. And as I do this work, like I start seeing that there really are very different profiles and personalities of people. They're the people who are like, yes, this is a permission I've been waiting for all my life. I'm going to run ahead and do this, right? And some of them like, responded to COVID and like completely redesigned their businesses and like actually became much more successful than they were before, even if they're in the tourism industry or the event industry, like they figured it out. right? Because they're like willing to go try this out. I have so many stories about this, but that's not the topic of this panel. But then some people, and especially in large corporate environments, are very, very, very resistant. And they're like, okay, but let me go and work for a week and present you with this thing that I'm 35% confident about. Is that okay? I'm like, no, by definition, it's not okay. Do it anyway. But right, but like they'll never want to come out of that shell. And I think that like play is the thing that, and kind of the history we have up to that, enables people to come out of their shell like that. And in terms of solutions, what we found, the structure that we build to try to make people comfortable about this is to give them a goal that they can have anxiety about, so that they don't have anxiety about the thing that they're pushing out, right? So we say, like, rather than measuring how good the thing you put out is, I'm going to measure how many times you try. So then they still can put their like type A personality onto something, but I'm like, okay, that was a good try too. Our goal is 12. So let's do it one more time, right?
I'm reminded,
go ahead.
I'm reminded, I have to mention this. I'm reminded of an academic study that was done where it was a pottery class, and the instructor divided the class into two groups.
Yes, yes.
You tell this.
That story. No, you tell it, you tell it.
Okay. So one half was going to be judged on the quantity of their work. The other half is going to be judged on the quality of their work. So the quality group, they only had to submit one piece of pottery at the end of the semester, and that was going to be their entire grade. The other group had to make 50 pieces of pottery, and they were going to be judged on how many they made. 50 would be a perfect score. And at the end of the semester, the ones who really agonized over getting that one perfect item, their one perfect item wasn't as good as the one that was just knocked off at the end by the time the ones who'd done 50 of them had been practicing all that time. You know, it was better than like their first try, better than their 10th try, but not as good as what they ultimately wound up with. Sorry.
And it blows your mind. It's the opposite of what you think, because you're like, more effort, a better result, right? But no, it's just like, and then suddenly there's 50 pots, and they're like, you know, and the first like 48 are crap, the last two are great. All right, let me hand it off to somebody else.
Romeo, can you tell us a little bit about some successes that you've seen or experienced in regard to overcoming play anxiety?
Yeah, gladly. I had one playing in my head of one of my students as well. I think also about 2 years back, and the student was very sort of in their shell. They didn't know what to do. You know, they weren't exactly the most outgoing of people. But what we started playing with, so the task for them was to create an abstract strategy game. And the student was like, you know what? Yeah, I used to play chess quite a bit. Let me give some, some indication or some idea to what we can do for our project. And at the end of it all, a student who for the rest of the year wasn't exactly as forthcoming with their thoughts and what they wanted to say, when it was this game this type of game, that's when they were, I'm gonna tell you about my game. I'm gonna talk to you about what I've made. And because there was this comfortability that came with, sure, all these other games I'm not entirely sure of, but this one that I know of, that I've played, there is some confidence there. There is an alleviation of what I don't know because I do know. And in fact, you lecturer, I'm gonna tell you about how to play this game. And it's sort of, I love that because after that, that realization that, you know what, I got good marks because I was able to talk about my game. Every other project that came after that, they got fairly high marks for, because they had that confidence now to come forth and say, hey, I can do this. This is something I can do. So yeah, that was a great moment. 2 years ago that really just stuck with me. And again, I feel like it came from play and from being able to play in a realm where you are comfortable and being told that, hey, what you know is enough. What you know is exactly what we're looking for. Put it in, do something with it, make something out of it. And yeah, that was great. Just one more tiny example that I now am forgetting. Crap. it was in the back of my head as I was
Put a
talking
pin in
about it, but
it.
I'll come back to it. It's okay.
I absolutely want to hear it. We are going to come back around. Sarah, your turn.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm going to try to weave everything in. Going back to what you started with, Joan, this idea of, it isn't just the game, it's never the game. Like, I think that's really powerful, both in my own experience playing, but also teaching, games to students. And thinking about Jay's point about how I have students who they need to be at 100% all the time. And, these are kids who are 18, and I'm telling them, you're going to burn yourself out already. Like, you need to, take a step back. And we think about sometimes with the larger issues of anxiety, outside of the game, sometimes in life, sometimes when you're feeling that anxious and maybe depressed, sometimes just taking a shower or brushing your teeth, that's a win. Like, that's a good thing. Like, you at least did that. And so I think about this in context of I teach English. And so in playing some of these games, we teach students that at least making a step forward is better than, we talk about analysis paralysis with games, like doing something is good. I think about students who are writing essays and they stare at a blank screen for 45 minutes because they just don't know how to start. I tell them, just type something, type anything. If it's crap, you can delete it. That's okay. You go back. And so I think about like my experience playing in particular, playing the Quiet Year the last 2 years. And if you're not familiar with the game, it's a role-playing game where there isn't really a win condition. Like, yeah, there's an end to the game and you kind of reflect, but you're making choices and there's a deck of cards and they correlate to a selection of choices, but you're telling a story and you're drawing things on the board. And just having students who were so nervous, like, oh my God, I can't draw. And I tell them, I draw stick figures. I can't draw either. Like, just go give it a try, and try to be encouraging. And I think, to me, that's a lot of what I do. And I hesitate to say life lessons, but this idea, like some of you have said, sometimes doing something is better than allowing yourself to be frozen in place and doing nothing. So I'm not really sure where I was going with everything, but that's my little brain dropping for right now. So somebody else can tag in.
I'm going to bring some of my own experiences to this. As far as helping others, working at the cafe has obviously provided me with a lot of opportunities to do this. That trick that Scott uses has been a helpful one. One of the other things that I've done is that when people sort of debase and degrade themselves, saying, oh, I'm too stupid to manage something like that, the first thing that I do is I grin and I say, I don't believe you. People who are actually dumb don't know they're dumb. You have enough self-awareness to be aware that you have limitations, and that means you're smart. You are at least smart enough to be able to handle almost anything on any of these shelves. Yes, even the complicated stuff on the top shelf. Don't worry, I'm not going to throw you that far into the deep end. But we're going to start with something that's going to give you a little bit more scope to have some agency, introduce you to this. And they're still scared. Sometimes they continue to resist. No, it's okay. We'll just play Cards Against Humanity. But sometimes they're willing to go that step with me. And when I do, the approach of patience, gentleness, humor, and a willingness to kind of not appear to be 100% brilliant and intelligent on my own, which is a real stretch, obviously, is a very useful thing. It's I've seen people's body language transform over the course of a single game. Their eyes begin to light up. Everything about their posture changes, and they have taken a step into a larger world. And it is the beauty of that moment more than anything else that has kept me in this field and has inspired me to go farther in this. My own personal experience is also possibly relevant here. I wrote about this in a Washington Post article. I transitioned quite late in life. I figured it out when I was in my mid-30s, and I figured, oh, I'm too old. I can't. It's too late. I'm going to have to just manage this. And it was a combination of realizing, no, I can't handle this. I can't keep living a lie. And also an experience that I had at the game table that that was one of many factors that contributed. The supportive environment, the love of my friends and my family, these things were all huge contributors. But one other thing was something that happened at play. I played a character in a role-playing game who was an older transgender woman. And for this person, transition wasn't this thing this anxiety producing thing that's coming and she's going to have to manage. It's something that she did ages ago. And I got to sort of live in her skin for a while in this fictional world. And there are quite a few ways in which she fails to live up to what's expected of women. You know, she's not young, she's not attractive, she's not all these things that all women are supposed to be in order to woman properly. But she had decided for herself how she was going to live. And living in that was one of the things that made me feel that this was actually something that was possible, that I could actually do. And that was both a vulnerable moment for me, and also, as I got comfortable with it, it became a playful experience. And those two things together changed my life. I hope that this isn't going to intimidate people, because obviously it's a big, heavy thing, but I'd like to hear from the rest of you as well, not only about things you've had that went well, but also things that have helped you to overcome anxiety, or that you have been able to use to help others to overcome anxiety at play and surrounding play.
We're going to go to Romeo, Dominique, and then me.
Sure. I actually don't want to move away now that John has touched on such a wonderful, just a fruitful topic there. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, John. I wanted to, the example that I wanted to go back to, it was actually twofold. One, there was just as a success story, a friend of mine, or former friend of mine, and a sort of my senior, Titi Chumia, he had just finished his master's. He was creating a board game that was specifically meant to be played in the townships, or made to sort of relate to people in the townships. And I remember, because our families come from basically the same street, which is in Limpopo, in Liboahome, which is a fairly not very industrially built up, sort of still dusty roads kind of place. And he targeted them specifically, and he said, I'm going to make a game for the people where I come from. And all, the people in Wahome, all they play, or what they were known to play, was either checkers, chess, or murabarab. And that were the three games that they would play. And he's, with the knowledge that he had, with sort of the ideas of the games that, going through his honors and getting his degree, he said, I'm going to make a game that targets their context of that relates to them and things that they know. And in his master's paper, he wrote on that experience of creating the game, and obviously sort of how people engaged with it afterwards. And he found out that when he initially brought the concept to them, even though he spoke the same language, even though he was from the area, he was from there, he was one of them, there was still a hesitancy for them to engage with what he had. But after a while, there was sort of this acceptance that, you know what, even me, a 68-year-old Black man from the townships or from rural areas, can still play a board game, even at this age. I can still, and I remember there were a few pictures that he also took, and they were smiling and actually having fun. And by the game was called After Robots. And, it's sort of a relation, or After Robots. It sort of works on the idea or the premise that you are trying to stop taxis that are passing by the area. And yeah, he was taking pictures and how excited they were and how happy they were to actually engage with this thing. And apparently even afterwards, he used to get calls for people from Lubahom who saying, hey, when you bring back that game, you know, we really enjoy playing that game. And so, you know, there was sort of from I'm not allowed to be in this realm to, because I was exposed to it, I finally can engage with it, even outside of what this game is. Yeah, that was a fairly, I guess, successful moment for us there. And for the second one, real quick, in our Lurik Lekotla talk that we gave not too long ago, we spoke about iteration, which I'm not gonna, go on because I'm sure Jay knows way more than I do. But we spoke about iteration and reflection and how we've been helping our students, not just by giving them those tasks that you need to make your games via iteration and reflect on them, but we've also started to emulate that through our own course, how we create the syllabus and how we give it to them so that there's at least an example there that to fail is okay. You're not meant to get it right in the first hand. And for something as big as a syllabus, something that determines your future, it's okay for us not necessarily also to fail. You're not recreating or changing it up because you failed, but because there are things that change, because there's the ways you need to handle those changes. And it's okay to want to change because of those changes. And it's sort of that idea of just redoing and recreating and going back and saying, does it work for what I needed to do and for the context that we are in? And then reiterating again. And sort of we try to exemplify that not just in our syllabus, but also for them. And hopefully they can see it in a practical sense.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, created great results.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to Dominique.
So yeah, I just wanted to mention there's two sort of experiences that I had with play. The second one is a bit darker, but a family friend of mine, she has a son that has autism, and he always experienced this difficulty in being able to talk to his mom, or anybody for that fact. His mind would race like too fast for the words to come out. And she'd actually have to turn to him and say, Kieran, go away, go think about what you want to say, then come back. Because he'd just sit there and like fumble over his words. But then as soon as he was in a session of play, whether it was a video game or a board game or something like that, he could speak perfectly. He could play the game and speak to her at the same time with not having to think about it at all. So I just thought that was an amazing example of how the realm of play like helps us go beyond our disabilities, you know, that there's something in the brain that just connects and it allows us to, where we've held ourselves back, it just somehow allows us to move forward. So I thought that was just a beautiful example. And then the other, I don't know if it's triggering or not, so I'm not sure whether I should mention it, but it goes with role play as well. And so women who had been in like rape situations and stuff, through a sense of play, they were able to find therapy because they were able to define the rules. They were able to decide when things were going to happen, and knowing they were in the safe space, it just helped them cope through that. So I just thought that was another amazing example of how play was used to look at something so vulnerable. So yeah.
The difference between agency and control is so important in this. In that case, you had people who had agency. They could decide what was going to happen, even though in the game they might not necessarily be able to control the outcome. They still were able to have agency over their own actions, and yeah, so empowering.
I love both those examples. I have a friend who is a drama and play therapist, and she does something similar explicitly for therapy, is that especially with neurodivergent kids, she'll play a game with them that they like, and then be able to talk to them on their own terms. And like, so she's had a kid where, you know, they just sat there and like stared at the ceiling and like played Magic the Gathering for like 4 sessions. And then like, you know, a few months later, the kid just looks up and says, I'm gay. And like, it was the first time he'd been comfortable having that conversation because he had that play environment in order to be able to like kind of feel like he really is, as you said, like in control of the conversation in a way that he hasn't been able to in a home environment. I'm also going to give an example of something that I've tried that's like super lighthearted and like in the completely opposite direction of everything we've been talking about, which is really similar to Scott's example previously, which is just for people with board game anxiety who are worried about playing like rules heavy board games, is that I use Space Alert as a gateway board game. And if you've played Space Alert, it's a really technical board game with a million rules and time pressure. And the idea is that you're all in a spaceship, and you have to plan out and the spaceship is being attacked by monsters, and like there's like, you know, internal like invaders and aliens and goop and stuff like that. And like, you have to plan out all of your actions in advance. And then it's a cooperative game where at the end you have everyone execute their actions round by round and just like hope you have successfully saved the spaceship. And there's two ways this goes. If you're playing with most people and chill people, you almost always die. If you play with hardcore people, you actually like win and score points. But like, it's actually like a hilarious setup, because it's a team game, and it's like one of the most high pressure setups you can have, except you fail for the most ludicrous reasons. And early on, it's impossible to get it right. So like, you have things like, you know, someone's like, oh my God, like our ship is blowing up because we all just completely forgot about this interstellar octopus that's like coming toward us because we were all concentrated on recharging the power core. Or like, there's like, you know, hey, you're downstairs, like, did you shoot this gun? And they're like, no, I was looking out the window because I thought I was supposed to be looking out the window. We're like, no, I forgot to wiggle the mouse. So like, everybody's actions are delayed, and now nobody can possibly succeed at what they were planning to be doing. So it's cooperative chaos, and then it like takes all of the pressure off because it's not about succeeding. It's about like which hilarious way you guys all die and your ship blows up. And then occasionally you do this a few times and your ship doesn't blow up and you're like, whoa, we did it, let's do that again. Yeah, so even though it's like super technical, it's like 45 minutes of rules explaining, like I use that as my gateway game example. So let's see, next on the queue we have Joan. We actually don't have anyone else on the queue, so I encourage everybody to think about, you know, whether you want to talk about something deep or something lighthearted, like what are some examples you've seen? Yeah, so we've got Joan and then Coco.
I'm going to sort of round up some of the things that we've that we've brought out as methods of helping people to cope with play anxiety. Much earlier on, Romeo mentioned the magic circle, which is an extremely important concept in play. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the magic circle is the boundary between the play space and the rest of the world. And within the magic circle, the rules are different. Inside the magic circle, trivia questions aren't actually trivial. They're super important, and we're all going to pay attention like they're important, and we're going to cheer if we get them right, even though outside, this is not important, this doesn't matter. Inside the magic circle, failure is not only fine, but encouraged because it's fun. We're expected to be playful and not worry about the consequences. Being able to establish the magic circle before play begins, make sure people understand that what's at stake inside the game isn't the same as what's at stake outside the game, that what you do here is not going to be held against you elsewhere, and anxieties and fears that you have outside do not apply in this space. Establishing that magic circle, creating it when you start, and banishing it when it's over, saying, okay, back to real life now. That all the terrible stuff that you did and said about me, and or to my character, my armies, my my troops or my pieces in this game, all is forgiven. None of that matters. You killed my king in this game of chess, and now we're friends again. So establishing the magic circle and strengthening it is one good way to do it. Being given confidence by smaller successes and a sense of identifications, like, no, this is a place where I can be myself. This is a place where I will be understood. This is a place where I will be appreciated. Creating a welcoming environment that is not going to be exclusionary and not going to have all these signifiers of a space that is for people who are not you. Is going to be a good and helpful thing. As the person who's introducing the game, being playful and vulnerable yourself sets an example and that can be useful in lessening anxiety. Game selection, super important, whether you do something that's that has relatively low stakes in terms of the complexity, or something that has very low emotional stakes, perhaps because of the complexity and the ridiculousness of it. Those are all good ways to reduce people's anxiety surrounding play. And one of the things that I've discovered is that there will be times when none of those things will be sufficient, because the sheer weight of all the anxiety that people have been shouldered with coming into that experience is so much that no amount of those things can overcome it yet. People will need to just go at their, you have to meet people where they are, but if you are patient and gentle and persistent, these things can over time have a cumulative effect that can help people to get to a point where they allow themselves to be vulnerable, and having allowed themselves to be vulnerable, they can then allow themselves to be playful. So I'm going to put the this list in the chat here, and if anybody else has further approaches that they would like to add to the list, I would very much like to see those, because I'm probably missing a few things, but you know what? Here we are, and boom.
I'm going to jump in really quickly because I know a few people have joined us in the last 10 minutes. So if you're just joining us, please go and modify your name to include your name and pronouns, and leave the chat open. A lot of sidebar talk is going on in chat. And also it's where we are announcing the facilitation queue. So if you want to speak up, just say something in chat or use the raise your hand button in reactions at the bottom, and we'll add you to the facilitation queue. So next we've got Coco Scott, then Dominique, Mike, Liz.
I think I'm actually, I have like 6 different half ideas in my brain. So I'm just going to retract that hand and listen a little more and then try and formulate a coherent sentence. Thank you.
Go for it. All right, Dominique.
So Jay, just when you said thinking about topics, before we started this this round talk table, I was thinking about the concept of play and vulnerability. And there's a friend who's also a game designer, and she's having to design a game with the theme of empathy. And so something occurred to me, and I was like, when designing a game for something like empathy, do you think for it to be effective, it has to in some way be triggering? Or do you think there's a way that you can design a game that it has that empathy or deals with things like depression and anxiety that isn't triggering? So that was just a thought that was in my head that I'd like to know what everyone thinks about.
That's a fascinating question. All right, we're gonna go to Mike and Liz.
What I like to do with, well, actually with any game, is to try and make the person feel better that I'm trying to teach it to or get them to play as, or actually it's to teach them. Because at this point, you have to go, okay, we're going to be playing this game. There's only going to be one winner. It means everybody else is going to lose, unless it's cooperative, which is why cooperative games are a great gateway game. And it's amazing how just saying that makes people go, oh, yeah, okay. Or like it's that because you lost here is not important. Not like it is in real life. You can just ignore that. But the thing that I really wanted to say is my friend told me this a long time ago. It was surprisingly wise for the age he was. And he's like, if you want to know who someone is, play a game with them. Play a game with them long enough, they will show you their true selves. And I actually have missed people's warning signs in board games and role-playing games and regretted it later. And if you need any proof on this, that's how I got interviewed for a casino. And if a casino does it, it's the best way to do it. Yeah, they took 5 of us up there and, hey, why do you want to work in a casino? Why do you want to work in a casino? And I literally didn't want to work in a casino. It was just 2009. I'm like, I don't, but I like playing games and I like playing cards. So after each time, or after the game was done, and we'd all busted because it was blackjack and he was the dealer, 3 of us got 1 colored chip and 2 of us got another colored chip. And the 3 that got 1 color went on, and the 2 that got the prize and left. And I'm like, holy crap, that was a job interview.
That's so true. That's like so true on so many levels. We've got a lot of interesting action going on in chat that I just kind of want to call out. Actually, we should go to Liz first.
I just wanted to give my favorite example of someone overcoming my anxiety, and I hope Joan will forgive me for sharing this story without checking with her. I have lots of anxiety surrounding games, as I've talked about before, and the one that I struggle the most with is having someone I know and care about stab me in the back in a game and not have it matter in real life, like not have it hurt. So Joan, being the person she is and having to always tailor games to the person she's playing with, took a long time before she actually played a stab you in the back kind of game with me. And the first time she did it, it was a very low stakes game called Dead Last. Oh, there she is. Yeah, exactly. And basically what it requires, it's a party type game. So you want to play this with a bunch of people. And, you know, it's a kind of a pick one of three cards type of deal to see how you're going to win this shootout. You're a bunch of criminals, you're trying to win in this shootout. And you do that by convincing other people to make the same move you're going to make. And then either by screwing that group of people over or by having them on your side so that you're not dead, you're the last one dead. So I was kind of nervous about it, but I'm like, it'll be fine. I know I'm getting stabbed in the back. This will be fine. It'll be fine. And we start playing, and Joan starts stabbing me in the back immediately. But it was always like, no, I'm going to pick your side. And then stabbed me in the back. And I started laughing. And she stabbed me in the back, I think, every round of that game. But it's
every
funny.
round. You would have ambushed me.
Hold on. You say that. But the reason it's so funny and the reason I remember it so well is because of how much you stabbed me in the back. I had a great time having my friend screw me over the entire game. And that's how she overcame my anxiety about being stabbed in the back.
Well done. That's a fantastic story. All right, I think next up is me. I just wanted to call out really quickly in response to what Mike was saying, and there's a little bit of this in chat, that I really just want to run a speed dating service where like you play games with each other a bunch really quickly, because it's just so much more efficient to see whether you're like energetically compatible with people on so many levels. So like my like version of like retire and start a bakery is like retire and run a speed dating game service. I just want to say that. Also, towards this notion of like alibi and games giving us an excuse to share things, I made up this game at one point called Poker for Truth, which is where you play poker, but everyone has tokens of a different color, or like, you know, they're all distinct, and you're betting your tokens. And then when you win tokens from a particular person, you can spend those tokens in like different denominations in order to ask them personal questions, like a yes or no question. Like, you know, 1 point is a yes or no question, 3 is a 1-word answer, 6 is a 1-sentence answer, or like 12 is a 1-paragraph answer, something like that. If you're playing Hold'em, you need like a larger, like a spread on what things cost. But it kind of works as like an icebreaker game, because it creates this environment or this excuse, you know, where to ask people, to have conversations with people that are like a little bit pushing your relationship, but like not too much, because you're like, here's a token to do it. And if anybody's super uncomfortable, they can always just turn it down. But we've gotten a lot of like, it's also like a kind of kickstarting relationships experience that we've had a lot. Okay, Liz, is your hand up, or is that from before? Okay. So we're coming on the last 10 minutes or so of the panel. So we're gonna do one more pass of anybody else wanting to share something. Please raise your hand, and then we'll hand it back to Joan to close off. All right, Romeo, take it away.
It's actually something that Mike and I were talking about in chat for a moment there, but it's the idea of turning an experience or a game into a story to get people a little bit more not even invested, but to sort of lower their expectations and anxiety of what is expected of them when they go into it. Because it actually, I learned this because it was done on me when it came to civilization. I don't like sort of build your own city kind of games, Sim City societies and all that. Those kind of games aren't really my thing. But I had a friend who used to play with a lot of his friends, and he would tell me about, Siley used to, go warmongering and attacking people and this and this and this. And he started telling sort of a nice threaded story of their experience. And that made me feel like, hey, I want a story like that too. And so it sort of lowered my expectations of what this game is, because all I knew it for was the idea of building. I knew it for the fact that you need to build your world and society up, go fight, come back with resources, a whole bunch of management. And so sort of delivering the idea and the concept of what it is in such a nice, nuanced, condensed form sort of changed how I also started playing the game, in the sense that I'm doing this to make my story. I'm doing this to play through something I had envisioned for myself, and no longer just I'm playing Civilization. It's more Civilization started to become the platform, and I simply built my story on top of that. And yeah, I think it's a great tool to help some people in future as well.
That's a great example. We barely scratched the surface on video games too.
Video games are a whole nother thing. The fact that they're almost exclusively solitaire games in which you cannot lose. I mean, think about it. Think of the hardest games out there. Dark Souls. You can't lose at Dark Souls. Playing these supposedly very, very difficult games, and sure, yes, it takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience and a lot of effort and a lot of practice to get to a point where you can defeat one of those. But you know what you don't have to do to defeat Dark Souls? Put yourself out there.
That's true.
Be vulnerable. Be playful. None of those things are required. And in some ways, the emphasis on video games, I don't know about the rest of you, but whenever I say the word games, almost everybody will assume I'm talking about electronic games. That's the default assumption. And although I have a lot of fun playing electronic games, I really like them. I've particularly been enjoying the Mass Effect remaster. But there's something that has been lost in the transition from one type of game to another. And we're sort of feeling it in the return of tabletop games as a cultural force. It's not just a resistance to, it's not really resistance to video games. I think it's more resistance to the sense of disconnection and loneliness that we're all experiencing collectively, spending more time with this and with this than with actual people. COVID has not made this any easier. But as we move out of the COVID era, as we begin to rediscover community and connection, people are going to be a little rusty. It's not going to be like we're going to be able to just go straight to the new roaring 20s where we're all suddenly partying until dawn, for at least not for all of us. Can't speak for everyone. But a lot of people are going to need time to sort of reacclimatize themselves to being among people again, towards putting themselves out there. And that's not going to be easy for everyone. We've gone over a lot of the things that can be barriers to this here today. And a lot of them are very, very difficult to overcome. But that persistent patience can overcome this. And tabletop games in particular, I think, are going to play an extremely important role in that, because they provide a structured system in which there are clear goals, clear expectations, clear boundaries, and clear rules for people to follow, instead of this sort of open-ended, I don't know what I'm supposed to say, how am I supposed to stand, how am I supposed to, it can be very, very anxiety producing to just be thrown into a social situation where you don't know what's expected of you. A game can provide the structure that a lot of people are going to need to do this. But if people are afraid to come to the game table in the first place, they're not going to be able to get those benefits. They're not going to be able to rediscover vulnerability and playfulness and connection that is so desperately needed at this point. So I invite all of you to take your love of games out into the world, as well as the tools that together we've sort of brought to the table here, and apply them with a persistent patience and gentleness to help the people that you like to be able to reconnect and begin our lives again.